Welcome back to another episode of No Shame with Shane. I'm your host, Shane Fordham, with all the shameless sports takes. It is about to get bad on Sunday. It's about to get bad. The Eagles are hosting the Packers as the second seed, hosting the seventh seed for the wild card round of the playoffs. And I got to say, the Packers are going to get smacked. The Packers are going to get smacked. This is a rematch of week one, which was more of a shootout. But this game on Sunday is not going to be like week one was. The Packers are going to get smacked. There's no avoiding it. There's no shying from it. There's no getting around it. It's not going to be a dogfight. The Packers are going to get embarrassed. But this game is important for a few reasons. One, it'll show how much the Eagles have improved since week one, showing that it's really a different team. Two, it'll set the tone for the rest of the playoffs. And three, it's a game that we really need to do right by Saquon. And I'll explain that. I'll touch that point later on in this episode. But the first game, like I said, was a shootout. It was a close game. Packers got a few shots in. This game is going to be nothing like week one. This is a totally different Eagles team, at least on the defensive side of the ball, than it was in week one. I mean, the only reason why it was a shootout was because the defense was really spotty to start out the season. I mean, we couldn't cover. The secondary couldn't tackle aside from Quinyon Mitchell. And then the D-line just couldn't get any pressure on the quarterback. Jordan Love had all day to throw the ball and make plays down the field to Jaden Reed and Romeo Doubs. Like, he had all day to throw the football. And I mean, the defense is much better now than it was then. So they were able. So I mean, if you look at week one, the Packers really played some of their best football all season. The defense, week one is probably the worst the defense has looked all season. The defense has only gotten better for the Eagles. Now, as opposed to, being a spotty defense who was getting exposed by Jordan Love, the defense now is the top-ranked defense in the NFL, the top-ranked passing defense in the NFL. So in total yards, they lead the league in fewest yards allowed per game with 278. They're the top-ranked passing defense with the fewest passing yards allowed in the NFL, 174 passing yards a game. And then they're also a top three defense against the run. They have a top three run stop win percentage against NFL teams. So this defense has improved drastically throughout the season. Quinyon Mitchell and DeJean Cooper have only gotten better as the season has progressed. I mean, in week one, Quinyon Mitchell was locking up Christian Watson. I mean, Christian Watson in week one only had about 5 receptions, 13 yards, if that. So Quinyon Mitchell aside, the secondary needed to improve in order for the Eagles to get to this point where we are now. DeJean Cooper, since he's been getting more minutes from Avonte Maddox, has been a vital piece against the run and the pass. CJ Gardner-Johnson has sort of entered into his peak end of the season, postseason form. And then Darius Slay, is also looking a lot better as the season has progressed. So, I mean, this is a totally different defense than what we saw in week one. And then looking at the D-line has done a much better job of collapsing the pocket, not allowing the quarterbacks to feel comfortable in the pocket. And it really starts with Jalen Carter. Jalen Carter, who has done a great job against the pass and the run, looks really more and more like a superstar every week. I mean, his ability to read and anticipate the movements of the O-line, being able to call out counter blocks, when a guard is going to be pulling away from him or toward him, which way the line is going to be shifting. I mean, his read keys and anticipation skills get better every single week. And it shows in his run stop ability, and it shows in his pass rushing ability. So as Jalen Carter gets better, the entire D line and really front seven get better. So this is a totally different defense that the Packers are seeing in the wild card round as opposed to what they saw in week 1. And what makes it even worse for the Packers is the fact that Christian Watson is out with an ACL tear, which losing Christian Watson at this point in the season, especially for this game, is devastating for the Packers. I mean, Christian Watson being their best receiver, their best pass catcher, one of their best deep threats. I mean, losing that sort of talent at this point in the season, I mean, it limits your offense so much because there's not a lot that the Packers are able to do without him. He stretches the field and opens up the field for the Packers, for Matt LaFleur and this offense to do a variety of different things. Now, in my opinion, the Packers have one of the more underrated receiver rooms in the league. But with that being said, even a healthy Packers team, a healthy Packers offense is not enough to take on this defense. There's not enough that this Packers offense can do in order to really be able to pick apart this Eagles defense, especially with how the secondary has looked since the bye week, and then especially the D line. So with Christian Watson being out, it'll allow Vic Fangio to stack the box and try to stop the run first in Josh Jacobs, keying in on Josh Jacobs, making him the focus of the defensive strategy. And Josh Jacobs is really the only part of this offense that I am minorly concerned about. I mean, he's a top 5 running back. I mean, was a top 5 rusher this year. Josh Jacobs is a legit threat. But with how good our defense is, I'm only minorly concerned because I don't think it's going to be hard for Vic Fangio in this defense to suffocate Josh Jacobs and make him have a quiet day. And if the defense can make Josh Jacobs have a quiet day, can shut him down, it'll make it much easier for the defense to operate because there's not really much else they can do. I'm not worried about the Packers moving the ball through the air. I'm not worried about Jaden Reed or Romeo Doubs exploding because I know Quinion Mitchell and Darius Slay are going to have them locked up on opposite sides of the field. It's going to be two islands on two different sides of the field. I mean, Romeo Doubs and Jaden Reed won't be an issue at all for Quinion Mitchell and Darius Slay. I mean, this is one of the best DB duos in the NFL right now. One of the best corner duos in the league, especially with the over-top help of CJ Gardner-Johnson, Cooper DeJean, Reed Blankenship. I mean, this year, we've seen Vic Fangio use sort of a shell umbrella coverage for a majority of this as a majority of this defensive scheme, for the Eagles. I don't think we need to see a lot of that on Sunday because of how limited they are with Christian Watson being out. The biggest threat against the Eagles in regards to the Packers offense is Josh Jacobs. If the Eagles can stack the box and stop Josh Jacobs, they can shut down this Packers offense. If anything, we want to force Jordan Love to have to throw the ball. We want to make Jordan Love have to beat the Eagles, not Josh Jacobs. Not make it easier for their best offensive player. We want to force Jordan Love to throw the ball because Jordan Love is not a killer. He is not a sniper. If we can force Jordan Love to throw the ball, shut down the run, the secondary is going to expose Jordan Love. Jordan Love is going to get exposed if the Eagles focus and key in on the run. Jordan Love is not going to be able to make plays down the field. Jaden Reed and Romeo Doubs are not going to be open for a majority of the game. It's going to get bad. It is going to get bad in Philly for the Packers. It's going to be a long night for them because they're not going to be able to do anything. The run is going to be shut down. And then Jordan Love is not a good enough quarterback to be able to dissect this secondary and make plays down the field to his weapons that he has. And then on the offensive side of the ball, they just with Jair Alexander being on injury reserve, basically being out for the rest of the season, maybe coming back if they were to somehow make the Super Bowl, but he's definitely not playing against the Eagles. So with Jair Alexander being out, the defense really has no answer for this Eagles offense. I mean, they really just have to pick their poison in terms of how they want the Eagles to score. If they want to stack the box against Saquon Barkley, they got to choose to live with letting A.J. Brown scorch him down deep, letting Devontae Smith scorch the secondary, letting Dallas Goedert, who is active, scorch the secondary, be able to cook the linebackers. Like they have really no answer for this Eagles offense. And this is me talking about a defense that I actually like I actually respect. I mean, they have one of the most underrated pass rushers in Rashawn Gary, who is a Pro Bowler this year, Pro Bowler for a reason. Kenny Clark, another quality defensive tackle, defensive line, an interior lineman who can pass rush and stop the run. They still have Xavier McKinley from New York, who was a leader in interceptions for the league this year. I mean, this is a solid Packers defense, but losing Jair Alexander, it creates an automatic mismatch every snap because, I mean, you don't have anyone that's going to be able to guard A.J. Brown one-on-one. You don't have anyone that's going to be able to stop Devontae Smith one-on-one. It's really just pick your poison. So, I mean, if they stack the box against Saquon, they're going to have to play man against two of the best receivers in the NFL. So if they stack the box, A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith are going to have a field day. They're going to go off. But then if they send that extra help over top, kind of spreading out the field a little more, using more of a shell coverage to contain the pass as much as they can, Saquon Barkley is going to have a field day. Saquon Barkley is going to be able to do whatever he wants. Jalen Hurts is going to be able to do whatever he wants, whether it's in the read option RPOs off of Saquon Barkley, or if it's just in the play action shotgun passes to the plethora of weapons that he has running down the field. So it's the Packers are really going to just have to choose how they want it and when they want it and how they line up against this Eagles offense. They're going to dictate to us how we're going to score on this drive. So the Packers are going to get smacked. It's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be a contest. And, the Eagles really need to utilize this game in order to set the tone for the rest of the playoffs. Because the Packers, if we're talking about an untested team, the Packers are probably one of the most untested teams in the NFL right now, especially out of the current playoff teams. They really didn't have to play anyone this season. And the times where they did play someone this season, meaning a team with a top 5 defense, they lost. They lost to the Vikings and Lions twice, those divisional games. And then they lost to us in week 1, and our defense wasn't even playing that great. So the Packers are one of the most untested teams in the NFL with one of the most overrated quarterbacks in the NFL in Jordan Love. Jordan Love is not this superstar that people make him out to be. At least not yet. He is not the guy who will be able to dissect a secondary, especially a secondary on this caliber, a defense on this caliber, to be able to win to win a game for his team, especially with Christian Watson being out. So the Eagles are seeing their worst competition to start off the playoffs. We're going to have much harder teams that the Eagles are going to have to face as they progress, down this playoff road. I mean, the Bucks, Vikings, Lions, Commanders, all better teams than the Packers. The Rams, all better teams than the Packers. So the Eagles need to use this game to set the tone for the rest of the playoffs. Because if the Eagles make this more of a game than the Packers, because that's the only way this is going to be a game, is if the Eagles defeat themselves. If our play calling, it becomes one of our obstacles, then the Eagles are going to have a tough time progressing throughout this playoff journey, trying to own their way to the Super Bowl. The Eagles need to manhandle the Packers this week because of how significantly weaker of a team they are compared to the Eagles. They need to manhandle the Packers this week. They need to put the pause on the Packers this week in order to set the tone and get a good start out the blocks for the rest of the playoffs. And, speaking of their playoff journey, in this game, they also need to do right by Saquon Barkley. And what I mean by that is sitting Saquon Barkley against the Giants, it puts more pressure on the Eagles to not only win this game, but to also win in the playoffs. Because we chose to sit Saquon Barkley, not letting him get the rushing record in a single season against his former team, the Eagles now have to make that decision worth it. They have to make that decision worth it by really getting to a Super Bowl, let alone beating the Packers on Sunday. I mean, in order to really make up for not letting Saquon break the record and etch his name in history, that the Eagles need to be able to replace that void with a Super Bowl ring, let alone a wild card win against the Packers. So this game, I mean, there's this sitting Saquon Barkley, which is a decision that I'm not mad at. But you sat Saquon Barkley for a reason. You sat Saquon Barkley so that he could be healthy for this point in the postseason, for the playoffs, for this time of year. So because you sit Saquon Barkley, you can't follow that up with folding in the playoffs, with collapsing in the playoffs the way that we did last year. You can't repay Saquon Barkley for sacrificing a historic and career milestone by not even at least making it to the NFC Championship. I mean, in my opinion, the Eagles have to at least get to the Super Bowl in order to properly repay Saquon Barkley. That's the only way that this decision will be worth it for Saquon. And I mean, there's pressure. That decision to sit Saquon really adds more pressure to the Eagles to win in the playoffs. And I know there's pressure that comes with every playoff game. There's something on the line with every playoff game. But sitting Saquon Barkley and not allowing him to break the record, it adds even more pressure for the Eagles to win because now they have to make something of that sacrifice. They can't let Saquon Barkley's sacrifice be in vain. And I mean, honestly, and I know some of y'all are going to get mad at me for saying this, with the sacrifice that Saquon Barkley made for this team, which, not only allowed us to sit him, but also the rest of the starters, because if you're gonna let Saquon play, you're not gonna let him play without the starting O-line and really the other starters on the offense. You're not gonna throw your superstar running back in there and not give him the proper protection and the proper field assets that he needs in order to succeed. So the sacrifice that Saquon Barkley made in not only allowing the Eagles to rest him, but to rest the starting unit, if the Eagles were to win the Super Bowl this year, Saquon Barkley deserves a statue in Philly. Saquon Barkley deserves a statue at the Link if the Eagles win the Super Bowl this year. Think about this. Saquon Barkley sacrificed making history. Now, I know I said that I think he's going to break the record next year, which I think he very well could. But at the same time, that has never happened before, where a running back has ran for over 2,000 yards in back-to-back seasons. This is a type of opportunity that is once in a lifetime. I mean, this was maybe the biggest sacrifice that a player of his caliber could make for their team that has Super Bowl hopes. He sacrificed etching his name in history, which probably would have lasted for another 2 decades, in order to give his team a better chance to win and to be crowned world champions. Saquon needs to be properly repaid for that. Not only would a Super Bowl ring repay him for that, but a statue in front of the Link that would last forever would properly repay him for that. That would be proper payment in my mind for the sacrifice that Saquon Barkley made for this team. If the Eagles win a Super Bowl this year, it'll be because of Saquon Barkley. Not only did he have a record-breaking, standout, historic year, but he made one of the greatest sacrifices that a player has ever made for their team. And if they win the Super Bowl and his sacrifice pays off, we need to properly thank Saquon Barkley for the decision that he made. And that's a statue in front of the Link with a Super Bowl ring. So I can't wait for Sunday. I'm gonna be dressed, ready for the funeral, ready for the Packers funeral, ready for their memorial service. But that's all we got for this edition of No Shame with Shane. I will be analyzing other matchups in this playoffs as the postseason progresses, and I will be back later on with more shameless takes.